I'm gonna just start the recording. Okay. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Imperial as One's Belonging series, where we look and explore the experiences of individuals from the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic backgrounds to hear their stories, to hear their lived experiences. And each week I say this, and each week it's very true that we have a very special guest with us. And that guest today is Bryan Bovey. Bryan, I met him a few months ago, and he very much impressed me. He was a co-founder of Imperial's Homage exhibition, which was an exhibition looking at African art and diversity. He's also a young entrepreneur, currently as a consultant. But I'm going to let Bryan tell us more about his story, and it is a fascinating one. So, Bryan, I want to just say another big welcome and thank you for joining us today as our guest. So, Bryan, if I could kick off and ask that question, which I always ask, which is, can you tell me what it was as you were growing up, which gave you your sense of belonging, your sense of identity?
First of all, thank you very much, Wayne, for welcoming me. And to answer your question, where was the first time I sort of belonged, or where that sense of identity got created? I think it's not an easy question per se. I think the sense of belonging is something that got created over time. At the beginning, it's more so try of understanding the surrounding and try to approach it. So as we had the conversation slightly earlier yesterday, I did not necessarily belong directly, or did not really find my place. I think as growing up, so I'm from a multicultural background. So my father's from Switzerland and my mother's from Senegal. So I had both sides juggling around. But born and raised in Switzerland, I was very much like imprinted by a Swiss culture, Swiss background, I would say. So yeah, I think it's trying to see what's around and trying to, what do you say? Yeah, try to get a grasp of how we can eventually be part of something. So yeah, I think it was building up through my childhood.
Okay. All right, we're going to tease that open a little bit more, but you mentioned about the fact that your father was from Switzerland, or is from Switzerland, and your mother from Senegal, and that you were raised and imprinted in Switzerland, as it were. How did that impact on you as you were growing up, when you were at school or elsewhere? What were the influences what things influenced you as you were growing up, and how did that impact on you?
I think indeed that the influence of the household, so different cultures, very strong rigor and hardworking from my father, much more welcoming warmth from my mother as well. Very hardworking as well. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I live. So yeah, these two aspects, but also the I guess the school was definitely a place where I kind of learned different natures of what do you say, the social realms, I would say. So yeah, it's I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly. Or
no, that's fine. It's fine. You're on the it's your discourse, but it's kind of like just thinking about the social impact, or when you were at school, how were you treated? How many other kind of like dual heritage children were there when you were growing up, and what was the response of your classmates in yeah, what was the response of your classmates to you in the classroom?
So I'd say it sort of evolved over time. When I was slightly younger, so primary school, I was in a smaller school in my hometown with quite a lot of mixed heritage, maybe more representative of Switzerland, so Swiss and another nationality being Italian or Greek or Portuguese or other things or other countries. In terms of like ethnicities, as a matter of color, I'd say. We had a couple Congolese, full Congolese students as well, but the mixity in terms of like color was still like small, I would say. So I would not necessarily feel I don't know, oppressed by this difference, like in terms of color, but I would always feel like different in a way, and not necessarily being like everyone, you know. And I think, yeah, there was a, I think I told you that I was a bit of what do you call this? Energetic and a bit of an aggressive kid, always like having a little fight or something like that. So yeah, trying to showcase a form of difference that was not necessarily related to like a color, but more so by an attitude or a behavior rather.
So how did the teachers respond to you then? And how did your classmates and how did your teachers respond to you? Because there was there if what you as you were saying that there were a number of individuals who had dual heritage, but many of them had heritage which meant that they all looked white, whereas your mixed or your dual heritage status meant that you had a different color setting. Did that impact on you in any way?
Um, I don't honestly, I don't think so. From a teacher's perspective, in that case, I think I had the chance to be in a fairly how do you say, inclusive school. Race was not necessarily a problem. Maybe more so the way I would think about it might have been a problem or a concern for myself. But like from a teacher's perspective, I would say I'd never felt like treated differently. And if I was treated differently, it was more so because of my my behavior rather than by the color of my skin.
Okay, so you were energetic. Was there any reasons why you think that you were more energetic? I'm going to put it that way. Do you think there was any reasons why you were more energetic when you were very little, as it were?
Mhm. I know the fact that you're playing on the word little. When I was a kid, I was a very small kid. I was 1 meter 20 for 30 kg. So it's a very little stature. For the one that do not know what meters are, I let you do the conversion on your own. But yeah, so I guess I sort of wanted to look bigger than I was, and show that I could be big if I needed to. Some funny story would be even as a small kid, the big kids would be a bit afraid because I wouldn't be letting myself being stepped over despite my height. So yeah, that's probably the reason why I was trying to be so energetic on top of, I guess, a form of innate energy, I hope.
So what? So when you got into that was in primary school. What about when you were in secondary school? How was secondary school for you in terms of how did you find school? Did you enjoy being at school? Did you enjoy the surroundings? Did you feel like you belonged in the school setting?
Interesting. So moving forward, I changed school. I was in a bigger school. So secondary school was like preparatory for us to go to high school. I don't know if it's the case for you. So it would be a bigger school, maybe 300 people, 350. Once again, the demographics would not be in my favor as a multicolored person. It would be, yeah, I think in that one, I would belong. I was belonging, I guess. I had my group of friends. Yes, indeed. I was also still energetic in that time. And yeah, I think, yeah, I think I would belong. Then maybe fast forward to like in this transitional year of secondary school to high school, I got the experience of being bullied rather than being the bully,
Right.
which sort of changed my perspective of how to belong instead of being the person that would like maybe stand up or be different in a certain way or in a certain attitude. I would much more try to conform and sort of blend in as much as possible, not to be in the situation of being bullied anymore. So I guess that was certainly a transition that happened, which eventually sort of impacted the rest, I suppose.
When you say that you were being bullied, in what sense were you being bullied? Why were you being bullied? And did you speak to anybody about being bullied? And did they help? Explain the scenario, if you don't mind.
So without going into too much detail, I think the primary reason for being bullied was because I was from a different color. The interesting factor I would mention still is that I was not necessarily bullied by a white person. I was also bullied by someone that was from another ethnicity, not necessarily like black, but and when I think about it, that might be a sort of like a reason as well. But that yeah, so yeah, there would be some behaviors, some jokes, some yeah, some like how do I say um some things that would not be jokes, but would turn into jokes for them. So yeah, yeah.
And so from that kind of like jokes that weren't jokes at your expense, as it were, right? You said earlier on that you kind of like felt that you had to conform. In what sense did you conform? And was it a survival mechanism? What were you thinking, do you think, that made you say, I don't want to stand out in the same way that I have been before?
So it makes me think that I did not respond to your previous question, which is, did I speak about it? And I did not, funny enough, because I would hope that I could actually deal with that on my own. As I always sort of did, like always tried to do, not saying that anybody was there to help me out, which would not be true. But I would try to take it on me to say, yes, I can handle it. And yeah, I try to conform. I try to blend in a way. So I'd say I did stand up for myself. I tried. Once again, picking up a little fight here and there just to show that I would be able to survive for myself. But at the same time, I was becoming less and less energetic, being more trying to be in the background, hoping that one day it would like sort of like fade away. Which funny enough, it worked. It did. Without standing out, you become part of the whole. But it doesn't necessarily make you belong, which is, I guess, the antagonism of being part of something or belonging to something.
Mm-hmm. You touched on something there which kind of like got me thinking in terms of, you say that you conformed, but was it that you conformed or you made yourself more invisible? So that they didn't necessarily now see you as somebody who they were going to come after. So you made yourself invisible, which then comes back to the idea which you were just mentioning about belonging. You can be there, but you doesn't necessarily mean that you belong. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's an interesting take. Yeah, I would more so, I think, be trying to not stand out rather than fit in. Once again, a small distinction. Yeah, yeah, because it would be easier to avoid any criticism or any behaviors that you would not be able to hold. I'll give that maybe instance. Fast forward, when I was a kid, it would be my mom that would buy me my jacket. And if I was to come with like a new jacket, which was maybe shiny or slightly different to that of the other kids, and a kid would come to me and say, "Oh, your jacket is like, it's weird. It's a bit it's not like I would like it to be," then I wouldn't wear it the next day. I'd be like, "Oh my God, yeah, let's go back to this old jacket, which nobody talked about, just to be in the, yeah, not to stand out once again."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So did any of this affect, as you were going through school, did this affect you in terms of your ability to achieve in the classroom or in the subject areas? Were you able to distinguish between academic life and life in the rest of the school?
So I guess in high school, if ever there are cool kids, the cool kids are not the ones that are the smartest. And once again, being smart is not necessarily like a thing that you want to stand out for when you're a teenager. It's not the right thing. So I would not try very much. I was good at math. I've always been, I guess. So I was good at that because it was really hard for me to be bad at math. But I would not try very hard on the rest. It was just like be average. It's like was completely fine. So yeah, you don't get those those weird sights when you receive a good grade. It did better. So yeah.
So again, it was almost like you were trying to say, well, I'm not going to push myself too hard because then it will make me stand out again. Am I right in saying that? It was kind of like being less visible because of the potential consequences of being visible. Am I right in that sense? Is that?
Yeah,
not.
It would be like not. You don't want to be like. I was trying to be more so like everyone else, and if it would be untrue to say that there was no very intelligent kid that would have amazing grades. There were, but those were a minority that would completely own their brain. And I guess I was not necessarily, in a way, I was not trying because I was like, I would rather have a social life that is more satisfying rather than pushing so much on the grades. But at the same time, I was not necessarily trying so much because I didn't want to have a social life that would be hampered hampered by my grades or hindered by my
Mm. Oh, yeah, I get that. I get that. So, what was it? Because if I ask what you do now, or when you were planning to go to university, or what encouragement did you get to say, well, was it always that you thought, I want to go to university? And what did you study there?
So I did a bachelor in management and economics, and I did a master's in international management at Imperial College, and right now I'm a consultant in London. So yes, sort of things changed a little bit. I don't know if there was like a trigger per se. Maybe in high school I had like a group of friends which were sort of like the people I belonged to. Like we would be together, we do everything together, and sort of moving forwards, things like I set myself apart in a way, and by setting myself apart, I made the decision of like displaying who I was completely, which was also part of like one of the reasons of setting parting ways. And that sort of freed me in a way of like being able to be who I wanted to be and who I could be without having to look without having to care too much about what other people would have to say or would think or would do.
So was this between going to you at the end of high school and transitioning into university? Was that where the trigger came, where you kind of like thought to yourself, I'm just going to be me. I'm not going to worry about what anybody else has to say. This is me. When did that happen? When do you think it happened?
So I guess the story is slightly more complicated than that because so as we all understand, I'm Swiss. So in Switzerland, when you finish high school, for the men, you need to go to army. So I went to the army, and by being there, I was not with my friends, and by living different sort of lives, also come to sort of like realization, personal ones, and some events happened. I was in disagreement with some of the actions. So I stated my opinion clearly, which made me stand out, made me sort of like make myself part, and thereby I was comfortable with the decision I made because I was stating my opinion. I was owning it, and I didn't regret any words I said or. And by being in that position, I would see who was accepting me for who I was, or my values and my thoughts, and the others. And then I was maybe more comfortable with accepting that some people might or might not appreciate who you are, but at the end of the day, it's me who decides who I am. And that was probably the most important realization, which made me go to university when the army was over in a much more comfortable pair of shoes.
So it was partly your military experience, the conversations, the fact that you recognize I have a voice and I can own what I say. That seemed to happen when you were in the army for your is it conscription or subscription? Conscription. But yeah. So it was at that time that you kind of like said, actually, whoever accepts me accepts me. If they don't accept me, we don't have to interact. And you took that mindset into your university experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say it was the military service was more so the place and the situation where it happened. And it supported this this realization because of like the situational aspects. But it was a very transitional period for sure. And yeah, it allowed me to move forward, I guess.
Now, one of the things which I'm really interested in, all of it is very interesting, but you curated the African exhibition at Imperial, African Homage exhibition. How did that come about? What were you thinking? Because I went to it and I thought, this is fantastic. What was going on? Why did that? Where did that come from?
So I guess that also boils down to owning your difference. I'm from a multicultural background. I think that's been stated. I've always been good at math. I've done economic studies and management studies. So I have a bit of a business acumen, I hope. And apart from that, I've always been sort of a creative, kind of a dreamer, thinking about things in a slightly different way. I like pictures more than I like words. I like numbers more than I like words. But then the thing is, like, I've always had kind of an artistic fiber, and when I was in my last year of college, no, maybe before that, I wanted to, and I still want to be an art broker, sort of like merging my interest for art and pictorial depiction and helping creators find the right people to hold their collections or managing this. And the idea was, I have an interest in art. I had an interest in business. I was finishing my studies. I was going to London, which is an amazing artistic hub, on top of being just a place with like amazing schools and amazing people around from so many different backgrounds. And as I may have stated before, I was more so on the Swiss side when I was younger, and I wanted to dive deeper as well in the African community, like try to understand and try to also find myself a little bit into it. And at Imperial, as of a great school it is, I think there's still some improvement that can be done from like a cultural representation from Black. I use the word Black rather than African because I think all Blacks are not African, and I think people from the Caribbean needs to be respected in that sense. But there's definitely more that could be done or to be showcased in that sense. And I just thought that bringing a conversation about diversity, about who is where and how people can actually belong to a place is also coming from the fact of seeing people that are like you, that to whom you can relate. I thought it was just a better way to open this conversation by the means of art, and letting people actually dive into someone else's perspective, that of African artists in our case, or African related artists, because we have a lot of artists from the diaspora as well, from London, from Switzerland, from Portugal. So yeah, that was the idea, allowing to have a space to whom people could relate to something they would not necessarily relate, in order to have a more diverse and inclusive and comprehensive space, I guess.
I love what you've just said, because it's about showcasing, and it's about highlighting the experiences, which effectively is what we try to do here as well, but in a slightly different format. So with the pieces and with the artists, what was it? How was it that you went about selecting them, and what was it that you were hoping would happen as a result of bringing such an exhibition to Imperial College?
So we had a theme to actually select the artist. a theme was created with the team trying to see the different facets of Africa. Indeed, at the moment, there was a, so yeah, maybe going back. Let me take a step back. The initial idea of like the exhibition was also coming from a TV news that I saw in Switzerland, actually. In Switzerland, we watched the French TV journal as well. So it was very interesting to see how the French TV was actually depicting Dakar with like a sort of a very, very primitive way. And it was amazing to see that the real Dakar doesn't look like that. And my sister that was next to me was completely offended. Oh my God, this is impossible. How can they showcase this in front of like 60 million people on a Tuesday evening? And because of that, like I'm raising that point to talk about the theme, because the theme was also trying to break what people could think Africa was and what it really was, and bring into a sort of a rough reality or a genuine reality through the eyes of the artist. So the theme was African emancipation, impediment, and digitalization. The emancipation, I guess, is like the ability of being oneself, being distinct, and at the same time being whole. The impediment could be, and I guess the emancipation also comes from like a an economic perspective of like now there's much more financial flux that goes to and from Africa as well. There's a lot of businesses that get created there, a lot more opportunities in so many different industries that will get too much into it now. But the impediment was also sort of like, what would be the impediment of being African from like an exterior perspective? What could people think? What would be the inner or yeah, inner impediment that you as an African individual or like someone could feel by being African, or all of these different like twists around this, and the digitalization aspect as well, simply because we are living in a digital world. So many more things are available to the world and to Africa because of the digitalization. And there's an amazing scene of African, I don't want to use the word geniuses, but the African minds that are using digitalization as a tool for emancipation and leaving this impediment in one way or another. So that was kind of the rationale. And we selected artists that were sometimes touching upon one of these three words. We had an amazing artist called Nana Fripong, and is doing a brilliant photography with a touch of digital changes as well. And those we're talking about the emancipation and how someone could actually find their way apart from the crowd. So touching upon the digital aspect and the emancipation aspect. We had other artists like Theo Gould, which was much more focused on the emancipation through the impediment, with a very, very powerful picture of a black man, or a mixed person with a rope around its head. Was very, very powerful. So that's kind of the idea, bringing in people from so many different countries, so many different backgrounds, having something to say about those words. And to answer your question about what it would be, what was the intent or the hope at Imperial, is much more simply open a conversation and try to create something that would allow people to actually express what they want to express through arts. Hopefully having something that that would be interesting enough for people to come to join, In our case, on an edition on Africa, maybe something on another perspective, another topic, but always through the means of art, and also at some point leveraging the fact that art can, in some instances, be very close to business and open this conversation.
Fantastic. Where would you like to see it go next? What would be the next derivation of that art project? Because I love the title, African Emancipation, Impediment and Digitalization or Digital Realities. To me, that kind of like speaks of freedom. It speaks of being free and emancipating your mind, etc. Emancipate and showing all of these things. So where would you what would you like to see happen as a result of that?
Maybe a tangible result. I think it was also part of our exhibition itself, is that we put some of our pieces for sale. And the proceeds of these sales would go towards a charity that has for purpose to bring more Black students from the UK into university. So that would be a tangible outcome, seeing more diversity immediately in the environment in which it has been done. And I think that's very much the idea now as a future. I don't. There was something I thought about, which was how to demonstrate the beauty of the minds of emerging countries, rather than thinking about emerging countries as poor countries who has nothing, to whom we should give everything. More so like changing the paradigm and say, okay, those are places where people need to be more creative. On the other day, I found an interesting video on, I think it was on LinkedIn, someone saying, this is the most amazing engineer I've ever seen, and he's 14 years old, and he's from Cameroon, because he was like, he built something that was able to actually produce electricity with like very, very little pieces of technology. And maybe that would be an interesting take, showing like what else is out there, where are the brains in those emerging countries. But that's just an idea as another one.
No, that sounds fantastic. And I really do like that idea. I'm going to ask if there's any questions from the audience who are with us, and then I'll probably go towards our final question. Is there any questions which anyone has, which they would like to ask Bryan? So what I'm going to ask, Bryan, you're still quite young. So normally I would ask, there was two questions I would not ask, which was, what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self? Or what would be your wow factor? But I think for you, I'm going to have to ask a third question, right? And it's kind of like, what would you say will be what would you say you would like to see happen going forward? What would you like to achieve going forward in your career? What kind of thing would you like to be able to achieve?
I think one of the two first questions would have been easier to answer. Something I'd like to achieve. I'd like to help people have more opportunities. I think I've been very privileged, would be the right word, to have access to education, to have access to a good upbringing, to be born in Switzerland, to be able to do studies, and to dedicate myself to studies. And if as a bigger goal, I could eventually help people have more opportunities to do what they want to do, being it studying or not studying, but just helping others have an opportunity to be who they are fully, then that would be one of the goals. And I guess the idea of at some point being an art broker sort of builds into that as well, because it would give the opportunity for the artist to be who they are without necessarily needing to be something else on the side. They could be completely what they want to be, if ever that is their intent. And yeah.
Listen, considering you said the other questions would be easier to answer, you've answered that one very well. In terms of, I like the idea of being able to have a legacy to help others, to be able to help them to fulfill their potential. You know, that's a really admirable. And if we can help in any way, then definitely. Bryan is one to watch in my view. I really was impressed from when I saw him and the way he put his exhibition together. Very organized, on time, really, really good. So, Bryan, all I want to do is to say a big thank you and wish you the success that you are deserved going forward. Okay? And thanks again for being a guest on Belonging this afternoon.
Thank you so much to you, Wayne. Thank you for welcoming me and for your nice words. And thank you for everyone in the audience as well for taking the time to listen to that.
It's fine, brilliant. You were brilliant. I'm going to just share with everyone what's coming up next week. So next week we're going to have Dr. Ada Mao, and she's a research associate with a special interest in educational inequalities and educational policy, STEM education, and informal learning and migration in youth cultures. So she's going to be our guest next week. And it's really, if you haven't seen some of the other interviews, or this interview will be going up very soon, please go to our YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO, and you'll be able to see those, some more of these videos. There is a kind of like a first 100 guests. We've got a little preview of that. So if you would like to have a read of that, then please go and have a read of Nikita's story, which is really great. But as I say every week, none of this would happen if it wasn't for the likes of these wonderful people. All of them have a story, and everyone's story is very much important. So as we go forward, we may be different, or we may look different, we may sound different, but you know, there is something that unites us all and helps us to find our place and find our belonging. So until we meet again next week, have a good week, and thank you for being with us this afternoon. Thank you.